fantastic to have you with us again. And thanks for all your loyal support and comments and feedback. Very fortunate again to have a wonderful guest, somebody who I've known for a few years and admired and respected greatly. Fantastic to have Stephen Woodford, CEO of the Advertising Association, with us. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for those kind words. Likewise.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fascinating to see your career journey, actually. So you've obviously been CEO since 2016, but I think I can describe a very illustrious career. You've held management roles in 4 advertising agencies, probably most fondly WCRS from my point of view because of the 118 work back in the day. Yep. But so much more beyond. You chair Livity, a youth marketing agency with very much a social purpose at its heart. You are also past president of NABS, National Association Benevolent Society, National Advertising Benevolent Society, on the board of the History of Advertising Trust. You were IPA president back in 2003, where you introduced professional qualifications for new advertising industry entrants. And of course, the work at the AA is crucial to the advertising industry, promoting the roles and rights of responsible advertisers. And I know you are passionate about the vitality of our advertising industry and some of the key agendas around climate, inclusion, and trust. But you have many other strings to your bow, I know, and I'd love to talk a little bit about your marathon running, because I've tracked that a little bit over time. The final part of my intro was that I just asked Sharon what it's like to work with Stephen.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and you were pleased to know this is what Sharon said. She said, "I love working with Stephen. He not only leads with gusto and optimism, he creates space for others to run with their ideas from thought to delivery. He's passionate about the ad industry and the work we do with the added bonus of a great sense of humour." And I think that's a very, very good summary.
Oh, lovely.
Fantastic to have
you on the show. That's a relief to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, you can breathe a sigh of relief. The worst bit's over now. so Richie, I'll hand to you to get us started.
Thank you very much, Mark and Stephen. What an absolute pleasure. It's a windy Friday morning where we are, but certainly
likewise,
I think, really excited about this. So look, let's kick off. Clearly, we've been through a turbulent time coming up the other end. But in our pre-call, we certainly were discussing that there's still stress and strains that exist within this new social experiment, as we call it. So to tell me a little bit about how you're feeling and how's it going at your end.
Well, thank you very much, Richie. And I think, we are living through the most extraordinary time. It's a cliche to say it, but, the fact cliches tend to illuminate a truth. And we are living, I've worked for over 40 years. And this has been the most radical and dramatic shift in working in 40 years. I mean, the impacts of technology came slowly. I can remember when we used to fight in the agency to be one of the first people to have a word processor on your desk because it was a sign of status. We were desperate to type and start to learn to use computers. But you think about the radical shift in our industry. But I think the most dramatic thing in a sense about this is that we've all shifted at the same time. When can we ever think, we normally see trends happen and they permeate from one sector to another or whatever, or big social issues come up like Black Lives Matter or, these. So we see sort of shockwaves and big impacts and so on. But the sudden shift of everybody within 2 days going from one way of working to another way of working and largely doing it pretty well. You think about how much all our organizations took this in their stride. Yeah. It's remarkable. And we rarely remark on it. But I think the thing that it's done clearly is the intensity of work, partly adapting to fast-moving conditions and changes. So the actual business environment intensity has gone up through all of the disruption. But also our working lives have gone up. I did after about 6 months of the pandemic, I looked back at 6 months of my diary and I was looking at an average number of meetings. And mine is a networking job. I'm out and about a lot and meeting as much as I can. I feel it's a sign of failure if I've had a day in the office. So I'm out and about a lot. And I was probably out 4 times a day, 5 times a day, pre-pandemic, back and forth in central London, meeting our members and so on. And now, 7, 8, 9 times a day, you'll be having interactions with people over Zoom. So, you know, the 20-30% increase in the frequency and intensity of interaction in short, sharp bursts. You know, if you're going to go and see somebody, you really say, I'm going to come across town and spend half an hour with you. You go over for an hour. You know, that was the standard meeting. I'm coming in, you book an hour in your diary. You have, so there's plenty of time and space around the conversation that you have. Whereas now we're sort of almost bang, bang, bang through half-hour Zoom calls, either big group meetings or one-to-ones or whatever, team catch-ups. And there's lots of good things out of that. It means that momentum and speed and velocity definitely have increased, and that's a good thing. So how do we blend the best of both worlds? The old world, pre-pandemic, office-based, quite ritualized in many ways, lots of travel, lots of commuting time, with this new world of intensity, frequency, velocity. Big, exciting challenge.
I think Mark's on mute.
Apologies. You'd have thought after 2 years. But Stephen, immediately I'm struck or reminded, of your eloquence. Just right there, you know, cliches illuminate a truth. You know, I mean, it's just you come up with some lovely words.
Thank you. I must have read it somewhere and remembered it.
Well, it literally doesn't matter because I love it. So yeah, I guess we're all a bit knackered. 20-30%. Yeah, I mean, that's emails, that's shorter team meetings. I mean, how do you maintain energy and momentum? Because you've got to have a boundless energy every day to lead an organization.
Well, that's a great question, and I think there's three things that immediately spring to mind. One is I have become much more focused on fitness. So just physically doing stuff, getting out and walking, and you know, so always trying to get a break where, you know, if I'm working at home, where we get out and just walk, getting in the fresh air, getting out, you know, getting away from, you know, if you like a 2 or 3 foot view where you're constantly focused on a screen in front of you. I've been cycling. You know, I was a very keen runner. I still run a fair amount, but I'm cycling like a, you know, fiend as much as I can. Classic middle-aged man thing. Bought a bike and all the kit, and I love it. So I cycle a lot, and probably, I don't know, 150 kilometers a week, maybe.
Wow.
And there's a great, I mean, in a cycling club, there's a great community and camaraderie in that cycling group. And we go out early in the morning, actually, even all through the winter, very early in the mornings. I live in Wimbledon, and there's something called the Wimblebergs, which is the short, sharp hills of Wimbledon. So yesterday morning, we were up and down the Wimblebergs, which is 40 kilometers and 600 meters, 500 meters climb. So, you know, you come back and you feel great. You know, you feel like really energized. So that's sort of because of I think the mental intensity of this, and we don't have days punctuated by that travel back and forth, which was like a physical decompression. A lot of my colleagues would walk between meetings, partly because I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, you're a fool if you get a cab or taxi in zone 1. Walk. You'll enjoy it more. You'll get some exercise, and it's a reset for your brain. And London isn't, you know, or in any city, you just walk around, see your city, see people. And I think particularly in our business, you know, I mean, as an example, I love doing the shopping. I love going to Tesco because I like to see brands and stuff in stores. So, you know, getting out and away from your desk and away from your screen is really important. And the third thing is I've invested in probably the best bit of technology that I found throughout the pandemic, and I'm going to demonstrate it live now, which is, oh, look, I'm standing up. It's a standing up desk thing, contraption. It's quite an ugly, great sort of Formica brute that sits on my desk, but it means that I probably spend half the day standing and half the day sitting. And it really does make a difference. They cost, I mean, you can get it for about, you know, cheapest ones, I think about 30, 40 quid, which is just like a rack thing, but stand up. Because again, when you're not in an office environment, it's not so sedentary. You're walking around, you're going to get coffee, you're meeting people, you're going from floor A to, you know, to down to the 7th floor or whatever, wherever you are. Whereas at home, you just trundle from bedroom to kitchen to bathroom and living room or office, whatever. you don't move. We're in danger of becoming very sedentary in our work. So I think all of these things, the physical is, I think, probably the most important thing that I've learned. Yeah. And stand up.
Stand up and be counted as well.
Stand up and be counted. Hey, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Stephen, you've really sparked so many thoughts in my mind as you spoke. Two things that really flung to my mind was when you talked about walking around London. And so my previous life was commuting from West Hampstead to Bromley, northwest to southeast.
Wow.
And quite often I'd get off, rather than going a direct train back, which there was, I would go to Victoria. And the rationale being is it probably took me an extra hour and a half to get home, but I would walk for 80% of that way. And the reason I did that was because I was almost visualizing and inspiring myself into action, looking at the most wonderful historic buildings that London can have, right through Green Park and the West End and all sorts of places. And it really genuinely helped me to solidify what I wanted from life. And those walks were really seminal in making key decisions. So, that's such a good,
I love that, because you're just aware of the history and the sort of, having worked in London, I've worked in a sort of like 3 little postcodes of London for 40 odd years, very unadventurous, not moving at all out of London. But it's the most incredible city.
Oh, it's absolutely the most awe-inspiring city, the most micro minutiae of building architecture. When you pass offices, you kind of dream about what it could be to be in there, to kind of think about carving your own path. It's a special city to have those key moments in your mind and let yourself get lost in those thoughts. But the second thing, when you talked about standing up, in fact, Mark's a big advocate of walking meetings. And it feels like there's an energy flow, positive energy flow forward, as opposed to a static energy flow when you're sitting around a table, for instance.
And that's such a good point, because actually the thing is that if you're facing each other on a screen or across a table, it's a sort of transactional thing. Walking side by side, actually think about it, you're side by side. You're both going forward together. It's a completely different sort of physical dynamic, which I'm sure is reflected in the conversation.
It really is. It really is. But I'm just going to do a little bit of a curveball and ask a curveball question, should I say?
Great.
So earlier this week, I was talking to a couple of clients, and they were professing to this amazing 4-day week that many people are experimenting around the world at the moment, in a bid to not hinder productivity, but increase work-life balance. That was sort of the way they were going, and of course, evidence prevailed that this is sort of in the right direction. Love to get your thoughts and point of view on whether you see a 4-day week being something that will be embedded into the UK advertising industry over time.
It may be over time, but I think it will go. Somebody asked me the question the other day, because I'm circulating one of the many articles that are going around about this. Said, well, can we move to a 4-day week? And I said, we'll move to a 4-day week when our members move to a 4-day week. We're a membership organisation. We are here to serve them and to help their businesses and so on. That's why. That's why they pay us, and that's why they join us. So if the economy moved to a 4-day week, and I think there's it's almost undoubtedly going to over a period of time, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, who knows? Because in effect, if we're upping if we're going through a phase at the moment where intensity is almost I don't know whether it's unsustainable, but it's pushing people right to the edge, there will be an adjustment. And things like, one of the biggest issues that we're hearing from across our industry, and it's being heard in many other places too, is a shortage of people. We have, if you think about in the UK, we have the highest level of employment we've ever had. So whatever it is, 75% of the population, working age population, are working. We have the highest level of female employment we've ever had. We have very low levels of unemployment. We tend to focus on the unemployment rate rather than the employment rate. The employment rate is about at maximum capacity of a modern economy. There's no modern economy that has more of its working age population working. And yet, whether you're talking, a supermarket or a transport company or an ad agency or a law firm or an architectural practice, they're all saying we are short of people. So, now how the businesses react, obviously, they're rational entities in a sense. They'll invest more. They'll invest more in technologies and other means of delivering, their products and services and competing and innovating. So I think we'll probably see greater technological investment to release more productivity from a workforce that's not growing at the rate, at least in the short term, that the economy wants, and the economy will adjust. And that increase in investment will probably lead to less, more productive people, and that greater productivity will allow the economy to afford to, move to a 4-day week. Because who wouldn't want it? I mean, what a lovely work-life balance that would be.
Richie says yes.
Yes.
Why not, guys? Come
you
on.
wouldn't have seen that, but Richie.
Well, I did see that, and I think across everybody listening to this, and across the whole of the UK working population, who said, right, we're all on a 4-day week now. Same money, critical equation. You're not going to have a big pay cut. You're going to earn the same money across 4 days. Of course, we would love that. But I think it's the direction of travel. When you think about, the broad direction of travel for all, certainly, Western liberal market-driven economies, it's to higher levels of wealth, higher levels of welfare, higher levels of concern about the environment and all those sorts of things, because material progress allows you to afford to do those things that move you up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sort of thing. If you're a subsistence economy, you can't worry about those things because you worry about just feeding your people.
Lovely thought, Stephen. So we talked a bit about the present, and we talked a bit about the future there. I'm going to go back to the past, and you've 40 years in a career in advertising that I know you've loved. I'd love to know how it all began.
Well, I was pretty clear I wanted to go into advertising from the age of about 15 or 16. And it was because my two favorite subjects at school were almost poles apart: art and economics. And of course, when you think about advertising, it's commerce and creativity. So I loved economics. I still do love thinking about how the economy works, how society works, all of the enormous tensions and challenges around. You start when you first lesson at economics is about, and it's called guns or butter, and it's about how an economy makes a choice between guns, i.e., weaponry and arming itself and an aggressive thing, or feeding its people. And if you look at Putin at the moment, we are living through a guns and butter moment. They've got they're trying to field a military of the size of a superpower, and their economy is smaller than Italy's. And it's a tremendously weak economy. It depends on selling gas, basically, and exploiting natural resources. Almost no productive capacity in it at all. So, this is when you look at recent history, this is what brought down the Soviet Union, was they couldn't do guns and butter. They couldn't keep pace with the aspirations of their population and field a military to match the US.
What a tremendous perspective. I've never thought of it like.
So anyway,
no idea that Russia was smaller than Italy. Wow.
Yeah. I think their economy is the size of around about the same size as Holland's.
Wow.
So you think, because we always think of Putin's superpower swaggering because he's a bully and a kleptocrat and they're a corrupt, horrible regime. But again, it's a huge country with an unbelievably weak economy. And unlike China, which has, come out of communism into and created an incredibly strong and impressive economy, yet Russians have squandered that same chance and just live off their natural resources. So that combination of economics and art. And so from about 15, 16, I thought advertising is what I wanted to do. I went to university, in fact, I got a place at art college, place at university to do economics. And I was good at art, but not really good at art. And the thing is, when like any sport or anything like that, anything that's about performance, it's very, very, painfully visible. If you're good but not really good. So I decided to go to university because I thought I'm not really good enough at art to go to art college. And so I went to university, did economics, and then all the way through thinking I wanted to probably go into advertising. And in fact, my dad, who was in business, said to me, he was very supportive of what I wanted to do, but he said, why don't you just look at marketing rather than just looking at advertising? And he gave me a little book on marketing, and he started bringing home, he'd get Marketing Week at work, and he started bringing home Marketing Week. I started reading Marketing Week and started reading about marketing, and I thought, this is the job. That's what I wanted to do. So actually my first job was at Nestle as a marketing trainee, which I loved. It was an amazing, I'm sure it still is, an amazing company, quite old, Swiss and paternalistic and lovely place. Great training, really invested in people. And but I only did 2 years there. And I'm not particularly proud of this, but the main reason I left was I didn't like working in Croydon. Nothing against Croydon, obviously, but as a 22-year-old, out of university, excited about the world of work, I wanted to work in central London. And I really loved, every week we'd go to our agency or they'd come to us, and I loved going to the agency. It was McCann's. Actually, I was working on Nescafe coffee, and it was McCann's. And we'd go, I think every Friday we'd go into the agency for a status meeting, and just, it was a massive brand, still is, but it was a really big in terms of advertising spend, huge spend. And that was the bit of the week I enjoyed most. So I thought, well, why not go and do that 5 days a week rather than 1 day a week?
That sounds like an amazing evolution into that space. But yes. I want to give a big shout out to Russell Parcels and Charlotte Rogers. Hey, Marketing Week.
There we are.
Yeah. That was the instrumental.
Avidly read it. Yes, and I suppose actually thinking about that art and commerce and where marketing is, of course, because it is, and it's this idea of orchestrating a business.
Yeah.
And the all of the challenges that go from the end to end of any business and in its marketplace, and trying to beat your competition. And I think, like everybody, I think in marketing and advertising has a competitive streak. I used to work with somebody who was a very, very, very driven new business individual, and he said, it's great to win, but even better when your closest rival loses. And I love that sort of sense of just, winning, but you've beat them.
I love it. I just want to ask, so you clearly have one of the most high profile jobs in our industry. Fantastic. What was the job interview like?
It was, that's a great question. It was a really difficult interview. It was, there was an exam question, which was, come and talk to three of the board directors, so the chair and two of the non-exec directors, for an hour. And we're going to ask you to speak for around about half an hour about your views of the industry and the AA's role and what you would do with it. And then we're going to have a Q&A for half an hour. But it was a headhunter, I can't remember the headhunter's office. So quite formal. And they said, but you can't use any charts, don't present anything, just talk. So so I thought about it, and the Olympics were on at the time. And so I just did a talk based on, the Olympic motto, which I'll get wrong, but, faster, higher, stronger, or whatever it is. I did a sort of version of that for Adland. I said, Adland needs to be, or the AA in its role needs to go, I think I said, broader, wider, deeper, or something like that. And just by having, and I think like it's one of the great things about just once you've got your theme, even I could remember 3 words that was going to be the theme for my little talk. The conversation just flowed. Mm. And then in the great tradition of sort of industry bodies, things moved unbelievably slowly. Took months and months and months for me to even hear anything. And I'd sort of not forgotten about it, but I'd sort of thought it had gone away. And I was doing various other things, and I was just about to do launch something with two good friends who had been doing lots of stuff with. And then suddenly it came along with a flurry. Oh, by the way, it looks like you're the person, sort of thing. And it just happened within about 3 days. And I had to say to my two colleagues who were still working together, I'm sorry, I've really got to go and do this. I really want to do this. Yeah, so that's how it happened.
And the rest, the last
5 years has rocketed by.
Yeah. So, Stephen, I mean, you're CEO of the Advertising Association, and you've been in advertising for 40 years, so you know your way around advertising.
I hope so.
What's your it's an impossible question, perhaps. What's your favourite ad?
It's not an impossible question. I could probably say my favourite ever single ad would be a classic VW press ad from probably the 60s or 70s. My first car was a Beetle. And like a lot of Beetle owners, when in the 70s, when I had a car, you could buy Beetles really, really cheaply because mine was 50 quid. It'd done 140,000 miles, and I loved that car. And I bought as many Beetle owners. There's a great book called "Remember Those Great Volkswagen Ads," because the Volkswagen ads of the 60s by DDB in New York, written by Bill Burnett and his unbelievable team, Helmut Krohn, the art director, and so on. They're like the inventions of modern advertising. All advertising pre those ads looks like it's from the 1940s. Modern advertising was invented probably by DDB in the 60s in New York, and those campaigns and a few others from that agency, but probably that one epitomizes the invention of modern advertising. So it would be an ad from that great campaign, and it was it was in color. Most of them were black and white. This one was a color one, and it was an ad which showed a Beetle with all different colored panels on it. So, and it says, the hood came from a 58, the wing came from a 62, the door came from a 63, and it was all about. And this was when the US car industry would basically have the 57 model and it had slightly different tail lights. It was all superficial. Nothing changed in the car underneath. And VW made this point about actually the car is interchangeable because it's pretty much perfect as it is. They don't do changes every. So it was the antithesis of the American car industry. And of course, it went from quirky. Imagine launching a car from the defeated ruins of Germany after the war, and it becomes the world's best-selling car.
Incredible.
And that campaign, and so I love that campaign. That was a campaign that really struck with me from when I was young. And then I'd say probably if I was thinking about a TV ad, again, an ad that just was in its time, seemed to mark a massive shift forward in advertising. And a lot of advertising people, I think, will refer back to the Apple 1984 ad, because I remember seeing it and just going, oh, whatever. Just, that was mind blowing. Seeing that in a cinema, and Ridley Scott and the whole, like a lot of Ridley Scott's work, actually, he trailed a lot of his ideas that featured in films later in commercials. It was a lovely, I think, when I was at WCRS, he did an orange commercial for us, and he had quite a few little moments that appeared later. One that I think appeared later in Gladiator. Yeah. So he's just, and that filmic quality in a 60-second ad, taking an amazing work of literature and saying something so powerful about this brand. And obviously, didn't have to say it, but the grey sort of automatons was Microsoft, and the athletic hammer throwing girl was Apple. It was just mind blowing. So I think those ads like that, that represent sea changes in the business. And the 80s was an incredibly inventive time for advertising, because it was rather like the 60s. There was huge reinvention going on. With really world-leading directors and like Ridley Scott and so on making ads. So yeah, those are probably my two favorite.
What wonderful reference points. And actually what really came through as you were talking was the transformative nature that advertising can have on an organization. And I think time and time again, business, i.e., the wider world outside of marketing, truly underestimates the magic that a communication like this or a campaign idea and thought can have.
Mm.
And I wonder, from your vantage point, love to get your thoughts on how do us as an industry navigate those naysayers to what we do, particularly when you've got a whole lot of people in the wider organization that may see us as a cost center, or may see us as, unfortunately, the still widely held perception is the coloring department. As a consequence, I'd love to get, how do we then break that mold and truly show them the transformative nature of what we can do as our industry?
Well, it's such a great question. It's one the industry's been wrestling with ever since I've been in it. And I think a big part of it, in a sense, is actually you have to earn that trust and leadership. And I mentioned Orange just now. You think about that brand, and Mark mentioned 118. Some key people involved in both of those, actually, which is really interesting. A particularly visionary marketing guy called Chris Moss was involved in both of those, and he was a bold thinker. And the thing is, as a marketing guy, he was backed by very bold chief execs. So in the case of Orange, a really bold chief exec. And you think about it was originally going to be launched. It was owned by a Hong Kong Chinese company called Hutchison Telecom. And I think it was going to be called, the original working title was Hutchison Microtel, fourth brand in the market. Vodafone and Cellnet dominated. There was then this brand called Mercury 1-to-1. And Orange came into the market around about similar time. It would have been, can't remember, the sort of early 90s, I think. Can't actually remember when it was. But anyway, this was a market dominated by big, established, very corporate players. And it came into the market with a completely different, first of all, a name, Orange. I mean, names like this, I mean, Apple was out there, but, quirky, sort of, what was seen as very eccentric. And it had a lot of, when it launched, it got a lot of stick. This is ridiculous. Why would you call a phone Orange? Well, somebody's called a computer Apple, but it got a fair amount of flack. And the launch advertising was just 48 sheet posters in juxtaposition: laugh, cry, talk, listen, and so on. A whole series of just one words, Orange type, and then a beautiful, absolutely magnificent visionary commercial about, imagine a future where we talk to people, not I can remember the script really well. We talk to people, not places, a world that's wire-free. So introduce language into the vocabulary that nobody had heard before. And there was a beautiful image of a big pair of scissors cutting all these wires. And it ended up, everybody remembers the baby floating above New York. So there's this beautiful juxtaposition of a baby floating across the city. And it said, this was a time, there was a very deep recession going on that seemed to be never ending. And it had this lovely child's voice. It said, don't worry, the future's bright, the future's orange. And immediately people just went, that's the brand for me. I'm optimistic about my future. I want to take control. I want technology to, and it was positioning technology as a positive enabler and all this wonderful. And basically what we call soft collar professions, so designers and architects and all these sort of creative industry types flocked to this brand. And it rocketed and became number one, I think, 5 years later, overtook Vodafone. Unbelievable story. So I was going to say the point, if you're going to take that leadership, you've got to lead. Yeah. You've got to earn it by doing brilliant, visionary things that transform businesses. So it's, that doesn't happen just by right.
So working alongside Chris for a period of time, he was a massive risk taker. He was bold in the extreme. And I think there's another layer on that story, which was that it was going to be kind of a world of blue and it was going to be a different name. And it was only on the flight out to meet the owners. I guess it was in Korea or wherever it was, that he revealed to his boss that actually it was going to be something quite different.
The orange.
and I don't know if it's exactly what Chris said, but it's something like, well, this is it. And I'm putting all my eggs in this orange basket. and the rest is history yet to be then to be made. Changing subjects, you carry quite a burden of responsibility as in terms of leadership position in an industry which, like many, has a representation problem. So diversity and inclusion has really had a lot more oxygen as a conversation through the pandemic, one of the silver linings. But we know that we have a representation problem in the industry. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what All In entails and the efforts that we're making in that direction.
Well, I do. Yeah, we do have a problem, and funnily enough, the All In, for those who don't know, All In was the brand that we came up for this, and we want an industry where everybody feels welcome, whatever your background, whatever your beliefs, whatever however you identify yourself. That advertising is a place where you feel welcome, and you feel that you can do your best work, and so on. So that's the idea of we're all in, and. I chaired a working group on ethnic diversity in advertising in the early 2000s when at the IPA. Found out lots of really interesting stuff. We launched a program and so on. So the industry's been worried about this for a long, at least 20 years or more. But if I look at the 20 years, has enough changed? We have definitely made progress, but has enough changed? I don't think anybody feels satisfied with where we are. So there's a huge, like a lot of these things, there's a huge amount of anecdote. There's a huge amount of, projecting your own personal experiences and so on. So we thought the best thing to do is actually get some proper data. And then we looked across all the protected characteristics. So all aspects of diversity. So all the protected characteristics that in fact are protected in law. And we thought, right, we'll do a survey. Let's not just look at the usual thing. People tend to focus on ethnicity and gender, probably top two. And there was data on those, but even the data on those, given the amount of focus, was patchy. And it wasn't consistent across different parts of our industry. So we thought we'll do a survey, and we'll invite, and we created a moment. So we created a morning where it was going to be, are you all in? And we did lots of communication around it. And we had pretty much 16,000 people sit down and spend 20, 25 minutes filling out this questionnaire. Weren't paying them anything or anything like that. They all volunteered in effect to do it. We have amazing support from advertisers, from agencies, from media companies, from trade bodies, from across the industry. 16,000 people. So it turns out I think we've got probably the biggest data set for an industry on all the aspects of diversity that anybody's got. I don't think anybody's got a bigger research base than that. So we now know a lot more, and out of that have come lots of actions. But as an example, we've found out that we're not too bad at hiring when you look at numbers versus national population. Probably low against the London population where a lot of the hiring is, but we're not. We've made good progress in terms of people coming into the industry. We're poor at retention. They tend to go, and they have a much higher claimed sort of belief that they're going to leave the industry. So if your average person in advertising thinks that 1 in 8 will probably think they won't be here in 5 years, it'll be 1 in 3 if you come from a minority ethnic background. So why is that? Why now we're digging into that, and we're doing much. But we've got a base of data now that means that we can actually look at not just around ethnicity, but around gender. Age is one of the big weaknesses of our industry, in the sense that we shed the over 50s, particularly in the agency world, and an alarming rate. When you look at over 50 employment in advertising, it's probably about a quarter of the rate of other comparable industries. Why is that? Is it the cult of the young and the new and all the rest of it? We don't value. We don't put the premium on experience that others perhaps do in other industries. So we lose people who've got 20, 30 years experience. So there's lots and lots of things. So it's not just about gender. It's not just about ethnicity. It's about all aspects of diversity. And we've got some actions in place. And I think this is one of the really exciting things coming out of the pandemic. I think around the two big societal challenges, diversity and inclusion and sustainability, we are seeing an incredibly consistent and really committed attitude from the leaders across the industry. There's no CEO or marketing director who does not want to see their business improve on those critical dimensions. And I think that's a big part of the talent issue as well, because young people are going to want to work in businesses that are inclusive, are places that allow difference and celebrate it, and of course, as a business that reflects society. I mean, we've done lots of research on this as well. We know that ads that reflect society, modern Britain in all its glory, all its quirks and idiosyncrasies, the public like them. And actually, there was a great piece of work by ITV and System 1 that looked at the general public's reaction to a particular narrative in an ad versus, if you like, that particular group. So there was a lesbian love story for Renault, for the launch of the 30th anniversary of the Clio. Fantastic move by Renault, because you think Clio's history was all about flirtatious, sort of Gallic, friskiness in a sense, and the fact that they'd done it and they had this sort of journey through life of this this female couple, and they tracked then how that ad performed against LGBT audiences, and how it performed against the general public, and the great revelation was pretty much the same, almost no differences at all. General public liked it just as much as the group that were featured in it.
That's certainly reassuring, Stephen. But and I just want to pick up on one point that you said around most CEOs and senior leaders all are shooting in the same direction in terms of their ambition and vision for a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And I would agree wholeheartedly with that. But actually what you've said to me, or what you've said in terms of the stats and that key insight about it's not necessarily about hiring, it's about how you retain. Actually, I don't think there's enough emphasis on that at all.
No. And I think this is why the data was so important, because we thought it was a hiring. I mean, anecdotally, we think it's a hiring problem. If we up the hiring and don't fix the retention, then we'll just be wasting more time and not making the progress we need to make.
But by the way, I actually think, sad to say, but I think that exact point there is showing how wrong English, but how not far we have come as an industry. Because it's very easy to shine a light on something, we are marketers after all, and get people to be attracted to the light. But actually, once you're in the spot, that's when rubber hits the road. And clearly, if it's not what it's then cracked up to be, we have a much bigger problem than we think.
Absolutely.
I just don't think there's enough attention to that. So it's lovely that you brought that to life.
Yeah, and one of the, I mean, we can talk about this a lot, and Mark mentioned my colleague Sharon, who's led on this, and she has done an amazing job with her working group. People like Catherine Jacobs and a handful of others. It's been a very small group who have now, I think we have 9 different working groups. But one of the key insights that we got, as an example, was that there's, if you like, the crude and very almost patronizing way of talking about white employees and BAME employees, and this sort of the experience between one of the things that came shining through the data was the experience of all of the various ethnicities throughout what would have been lumped two or 3 years together as BAME it was as different as between white audiences and when you started to break them out, class and where you come from, the culture in your community, the difference between, say, Afro-Caribbean and Black African, or between South Asian, huge differences, and then religion as another area of tension, and where people may feel uncomfortable if around their own religious observances or whatever, or some of the things they see in the work culture that feel make them feel uncomfortable. All of this sort of stuff has started to come to light, and so we've got groups looking at all these things that are very much championing their thing, like working class talent, which is one of the great things that cuts across is a real issue. We don't attract anything like the amount of people from working class backgrounds that we ought to, if we're going to reflect the audience we serve. Ultimately we're you could say it's important for law or any other profession, but particularly for a business that is about understanding audiences. We're here to, I always think our industry is in the service of the public. Marketing is in the service of the consumer. It's about organizing the business to better serve the consumer. Mm-hmm. If we don't understand our consumers properly, because they're people not like us, we're failing.
I think Mark's on mute again.
Yeah, apologies. The storm is starting to bite a little here. So
yes, getting nice and blowy. Yeah.
Wise words, Stephen. And so, I mean, it's tragically, it leads us towards the end of this session. So my final question, taking all of that wisdom and experience and perspective, and recognizing it's not an easy industry to get into and to thrive in. What would be your advice to advertisers or marketers, people in and around this industry trying to get in and get on? What would your words of advice be?
Well, over the years, I've had lots and lots of people, often, friends and their sons and daughters and others ask about, how do I get into advertising? What do you need? And I think like everything, whatever, it's advertising and marketing jobs are highly demanded. A lot of people want to do them. And there's a lot of, and there's many more people who are qualified to do them than there are probably roles. So you think about, okay, the competition's always going to be difficult. The thing that makes the difference, and I absolutely firmly believe, probably one of the most valued things in any work environment is just persistence. Just try harder, do it longer, follow up quicker. The ones that like anything, it's the people who it's a bit like, whether it's sport or anything like that, it's people who train harder and try harder. We all broadly got the same level of ability and talent. We've got different attributes that made us suit different roles. People who tend to do best are ones that just are more persistent about it. I really wanted to get into advertising, and so I by the time I went to interviews, I'd read a lot about it. I knew a lot about it. I remember interviewing somebody who was a prospective intern placement, and I said to this very nice young chap, tell me your favorite ads. Like the most basic question you're going to get in any interview going to an ad agency. Have some ads in mind. And he said, oh, you know what? I can't really think of any. I don't really watch much TV. And I said to him, with respect, this is what we do. That's our product. It's a bit like going to a car company and somebody says, well, so what car brands? Well, I'm not interested in cars. Obviously you didn't get the role. So it's that, if you're going to spend your working life doing it, if it's going to be your choice, you've got to be passionate about it. You've got to read about it. You've got to follow it. You've got to know who the players are. You've got to, and when somebody says, what's your favorite ad? And you say, whatever it is, Nike Londoner. The next question is always going to be, as night follows day, tell me why. And if you say, oh, because it's got footballers in it or whatever, not great. And then they'll say, so how do you think it works? What do you think Nike were trying to do with that ad? So thinking it through from the marketer's point of view, and anybody can, you don't need to be an expert to answer those questions. Thinking through, why have they done that? I always love that in advertising. When you look at a break, you think, particularly when you see an absolute howler of an ad, you think, why did they do that? You can do anything. And they've made something really boring or really plonky or, why did they do that? So anyway, I would say that it's about persistence and just, when you have that opportunity and you get that first intern interview or whatever it happens to be, or placement or grad trainee place, you turn up and your passion and desire for the job shines through.
And Stephen, on that note, your passion and desire for the job shines through to this day.
Thank you.
It has been truly inspiring. And I've just loved, as Mark put it earlier, your use of vocabulary, your use of case studies, the the things that have held you dear. And I've got no doubt that if we ever asked you what, how, and where it work, you'd be able to identify that in a heartbeat. Quite frankly, interestingly, I started my career out at Orange on the shop floor. So I thought I was the guy behind the success, but now I've learned different. There we are. There's a big,
but I bet you felt, Rich, I bet you felt great about selling that brand.
It was my favorite job in the world. I still to this day, when it was my grad job, I was at uni, and 2.5 days a week, I was standing there selling phones at the Orange shop in Edinburgh. And it was the most wonderful experience. And in fact, I'll tell you what, I was so committed to the brand that I would even go out on nights out wearing the uniform. Now that's how committed I was to it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And
that's a great example. And in fact, another little example of it, when the first phone that you'll remember these phones, I can't remember, it was a Nokia, whatever the model number was, but it was square. It was quite a cool looking Nokia. And we used to advertise in the press the deals on it. And the phone in the press had a little orange stick, logo sort of embedded on the phone. And the first, 100,000 phones that were delivered by Nokia didn't have the logo. We had to retrofit. We had to supply to customers stickers because they wanted to show, I've got an Orange.
Isn't it amazing?
I know.
The power of brands. The power of brands.
There you go. Yeah. I'll move to a final wrap. Thanks, Richie. First thing, we've mentioned Sharon twice, so should we say Sharon Lloyd Barnes, wonderful Sharon Lloyd Barnes, who we've name checked a couple of times. I also loved you reminding me of 1984. Crazy Ones. The Crazy Ones will be up there for me.
Yes, absolutely.
As another great piece of work. And Persistence speaks the voice of somebody who's a seasoned marathon runner. So I can see that. I can see the big. Now, we didn't even get into that. We could have talked about so much more. But as I was thinking, as we were going through about how would I characterize you, Stephen, through this interview, it's actually all the E's. So your eloquence. We obviously had cliches illuminate a truth, but you talked about advertising as commerce and creativity, such a simple and pithy way, but so accurate. I also thought your experience. I maybe go for encyclopedic. Actually, the perspective you bring, I mean, not least about Russia, but more generally, your energy and enthusiasm. When you talk about some of the conversations that have been around for a long time within the industry, you've still got the passion there. And a bit of EQ as well in there as a fourth. That you get it, you get the big issues, you can relate to them, and you're passionate about fixing them. So it's been a wonderful experience to have you on the show, Stephen, and thank you again. I know it will be very much appreciated by everybody who listens in, so thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.